Christmas morning, we head down the stairs. Presents are all out under the tree, and it's a happy time. It's the time the kids look forward to. In my daughter's mind, straight away, she's assessing who's got more presents or whether they're bigger or smaller. She needs things to be equal on an equal level, and that's part of the way her brain works with PDA. Equalising is becoming one of those phrases that's being used more and more in the PDA world, or in the autism world in general, I think, but it's certainly something that we see much more present with PDA kids. So I'm going to go through and explain what equalising is and why it occurs. So we've gone through many times on this channel about the different traits that are associated with pathological demand avoidance, or PDA. But one of the ones which is often missed is the expressed desire to be equal to or better than others. Now, this is all part of the brain working to try and keep things on an even keel. So we've talked about anxiety. I think the central facet of almost all neurodivergent conditions, but especially with PDA, is this internal anxiety. And for my daughter, her anxiety is always at a peak. So we've talked many times about the glass. We've all got an internal emotional cup. We really notice it at Christmas because there's so much excitement. This is the thing with the emotional cup. It can be positive or negative emotions that fill it. And when we got Christmas and it's all the lights and the excitement, and we know Santa's coming and there's presents to be had, and it's just Christmas music everywhere, and it all builds up and up, and it's an excitement, it's positive, but there's only so much it can take. When my daughter already has a very full emotional cup at the best of times because it's so full of anxiety, it doesn't take much for it to come spilling over. So subconsciously, her brain is constantly working to try and bring an equilibrium, to stay in control, because that helps her manage her anxiety. It all takes place on a completely subconscious level, but it really comes back to the fight, flight, freeze or fawn mechanism that we all have. In a simple way to look at it, and I've used this example in previous videos, but it's worth revisiting. We have three parts essentially to the brain. The front, we've got Spock, pure logic. That's what he does. It's all logical processing, mathematical problem solving. That's where you go to, Spock. Towards the back, middle of the brain, you've got Kirk, and that's our emotional center. That's all our feelings, our emotions, everything that bubbles over there. And then at the base of our brain, we've actually got what's called the amygdala. Now that's where our fight, flight, freeze or fawn mechanism emanates from. It's our danger awareness. And the amygdala, we'll call the lizard, the famous lizard man from Star Trek. It's basically our reptilian instincts that exist there. So it's a good term for it. When our brains are healthy, all three of these are talking and communicating with each other. We've got our danger awareness in the amygdala, and that is looking around, keeping our eye out for potential danger. It's an essential part of our survival instinct. If it detects danger, we have an emotional response. So Kurt goes, oh, I don't like that. I'm a bit scared, concerned. Awareness is up. But both are communicating with Spock, who's going through a logical process. Most likely that was just the wind downstairs. Go and check it out just in case, but nothing too much to worry about. You go down and see the cat's knocked over a vase or something like that. All understood. You've had a logical processing, and you can go back to sleep or whatever it was that you were doing at the time. What happens is when we move into meltdown, so for my daughter, when she moves into a meltdown, Spock leaves the picture. Basically, logic has gone from her ability to process the world around her. All she has is Kirk and the lizard, emotion and fight, flight, freeze or fawn, all swelling around in her head, communicating, arguing with each other, panicking, if you like, and it results in, for my daughter, a meltdown. It could be, for some, it's a shutdown. For my daughter, it's a meltdown, a full-scale, aggressive, violent meltdown, danger everywhere, panic stations, and that's what it is for her. She's having a panic attack. It's not logical. It's not something she's doing deliberately. This is part of her brain chemistry. It's just how her mind works, and it's part of what PDA is essentially. As a way to try and keep things at a level heading. So the way they try and repress this emotional cup and stop it from spilling over is to equalise. So it comes back to this need to be equal to or better than others. And you see it in so many PDA kids, and it's really apparent with my daughter. It really comes out in role play scenarios. My daughter doesn't do role play so much anymore. She's outgrown that. But when she would always be the teacher. She'd always be the parent. She was always somebody in charge, somebody in control. She had to be that person. It all comes back to that primary pathological demand avoidance trait, which is the need for control. So when they see that something's unfair, a real sense of injustice, and this is another common trait that is often discussed with PDA, is this sense of injustice. It's usually a personal injustice if it's not fair to me. And we've all been in situations like that, haven't we? Whether it's fair or not. We've had situations where we can see something isn't just, and it's beyond normal frustration because you're helpless to do anything about it. When you see injustice in the world, I remember watching Making a Murderer on Netflix. Really interesting show about a guy who's clearly not guilty, who's been jailed for decades of his life simply because he's been put in there unjustly and the system isn't allowing him to get free. There's a sense of injustice in it and it makes you so angry and frustrated. Thankfully, as I'm watching that, I've got Spock in my brain going, this is, the logical thing. There's nothing you can do about it, whatever it is. I still feel that frustration, but I'm able to control it through a logical process. For my daughter, when she sees an injustice, and it's a perceived injustice, this isn't necessarily something that is actually unjust, but to her, that's what it is. When she sees something, so somebody has a bigger present, it might be that she's got something that's worth far more in a smaller box, but the difference in size, to her, that's an injustice. Why have they got something big and I've only got something small? And you'll see this with kids. They'll often pick on their siblings especially, or they'll have somebody that they sort of focus in on. It's a sense of injustice. My daughter's having an issue with a child at school at the moment. And I was talking to her tutor about it today, and she was saying that, she seems to have a real focus on this person at the moment. And that's what it is. It's like this person's getting all the attention, if you like, and she sees that as unjust. Where's my attention? So why is he getting all the attention? And it creates this injustice, and she's overreacting to the situation. Now, that child isn't getting any more attention than is necessary, and she gets plenty of attention, but her perception is that this isn't fair. And so these equalising behaviours start to creep in. And this is where this word equalising really starts to come about. It's something that's sort of become a bit of a buzzword in the community at the moment, but it's certainly something that is very present. It's really something we've already understood, but it's putting a name to it. So there will be times my daughter will just lash out at my son, and we have to keep a real close eye on that. What it really comes down to is that she perceives that he's getting more attention than her, or he's getting some kind of special treatment to her, and therefore it's unfair. And so what she's trying to do is equalise the situation. You can imagine a set of scales, and that's what her head's like. It's like a set of scales with the balance of fairness, others and herself. And it needs to be either in balance or tipped towards her favour. The problem is when she perceives an injustice, when she perceives that there's an imbalance, she sees that they're getting more attention at this point, it puts them up, and therefore she will go to do something to equalise those things. So she will lash out. She might knock over a toy or break a toy. She'll do something that brings the attention to her. That is an equalising behaviour, and we see it a lot in pathological demand avoidance. It's just not something that's really been named before, but this equalisation term has come in, and I think it's a really effective way of looking at it. When you start to examine how PDA works, that sense of justice, that need for control, they're seeing something that's unjust and they're trying to bring that justice back in, and from their perception it puts them back in control, and that's how they're maintaining their anxiety. So it's a really interesting facet of pathological demand avoidance, and it's something that is very difficult to control. It's something that I have to be acutely aware of all the time. I need to make sure that both my kids are getting equal amounts of attention and equal amounts of fair treatment, and I think parents, we do that anyway. I love both of my kids equally. There's nothing I wouldn't do for them. There are times where my son may need more attention, so he's got homework to do. My son's recently been diagnosed as ADHD, so that's taken some attention there. We've had to deal with getting that worked out and diagnosed for him and stuff like that. So that's an attention that's sort of being taken away from my daughter. So she's now more anxious than ever. She's had a few days off school because she's been feeling so sick, which is actually down to this anxiety. It's having a physical effect on her. She's perceiving an injustice that's taking place, and it's not even something she's aware of. It's totally subconscious. She doesn't understand what's taking place in her head. So she's focusing on these injustices with, probably my son, with this other child at school, seeing it, and it's affecting her behaviour. And what it's doing at the moment is leading to some very anxiety-driven behaviours. Now, we've seen that in the past as being something that she would do then, which becomes aggressive or violent, or pushes herself above the status of the other person, makes her somehow better. And this sense of injustice is a very personal thing, and you'll see it when something's been done wrong, and my daughter will not see that she's done anything wrong in it, and you have to kind of really spell it out. She doesn't see that side of it. It's just simply an injustice that needs to be corrected. It can lead to some very challenging behaviours. So just taking a moment to go, I'll be with you in a minute, Pickle. I'll be, not too long and I'll be over there and I'll help you as well, or whatever it is, or making sure I'm balancing that kind of stuff just helps. And it takes so much brain power because you need to focus every now and again on something else or somebody else. But when that happens, that's when that sense of injustice can creep in. That's when you get this equalization. It's the brain trying to enforce that logic. In fact, it can be helpful in some ways because when that equalization comes in, it's really a logical process. It's actually keeping Spock in the picture. He's coming back in to equalize things, but it's not working in a healthy way. It's almost making a passing reference to him rather than bring him into the full conversation. So it's basically, we've got a situation, I feel like I'm being minimized here, I need to put myself above everything else, I'm going to do this, which is going to do it. It's a logical process, it's not a healthy logical process, and it's not a conscious decision. As I said, it's something that's taking place on a purely subconscious level for her, but it happens. And it's when you see these things happening that you may need to step back and just bring that equalization in yourself. If we can bring it in, if we can bring that sense of justice back in, I'm with you still. I'm just dealing with this and I'll be with you in a moment. Is that going to be okay? Again, I'm trying to put the control back in her. You're making the choice of whether I can do this or not. She's not really, but it's how it comes across. Then I can continue focusing on what I've got to do and then move on to her. And do it the other way as well. So when I'm having to focus on her, I make sure that I spend time with my son as well and make sure that he's okay. And it's one of those things, it's a tricky one to balance, but it is all about getting that scale balanced, keeping those scales at that level. And there's going to be some leeway either way. You're never going to have it sitting perfectly. When you see them, they kind of rock, don't they, for a while. It's basically like that. It's always going to be like that. But when I know that I'm putting more weight on one side of the scale and it's raising the other side up, that's when I know I need to address that so that it doesn't become something that's a problem down the track. It all comes down to that internal anxiety, and the more that we can address anxiety, the more that we can help our kids work through that anxiety, express it healthily, the better we're going to be. Looking for those warning signs, and this is what it's all about. I think being a parent of a neurodivergent kid is so much harder than the standard parenting, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It just means that there's a lot more involvement than we have to be. I wouldn't change my kids for the world. I love them as who they are. They are amazing kids, and they're going to change this world. I know it. The difference is that it just takes a lot more intensity. Our involvement has to be a lot higher because we're constantly, our amygdala's firing. We're aware of those danger signs. The lizards going off in our own brains purely because we're keeping things as calm as they can be because we don't want to see the destructive side of things come out. So the top tip basically is if you see this starting to take place, is take a step back and try to equalize it before it becomes an issue. Big tip is to try and keep Spock involved in the picture. The thing with a meltdown or a shutdown is that once Spock's gone, he's gone for a good while. He's not coming back into the picture. When they reach that point of meltdown, it's a pure panic attack and no amount of explaining, and you just basically got to ride it through and help them feel as safe as you can. If you can see that things are escalating, I can see when she starts stimming more or she might be sort of looking pensive. I'm always keeping an eye on that. So if I'm spending time with my son on something we need to focus on, I'm keeping it aware because I can then address it quickly and then move back in. Just think about it. I'm going to be with you in a moment, don't you? Yes. So are you okay if I just finish this off because my son really needs to do this right now, and then we can come to you and she'll be okay. I can wait X amount of minutes, and she'll try and take control of that situation. It will often be, I'll give you 5 minutes, and then it's dealing with it from that. So a negotiation that takes place. Any PDA parent here will know that whole negotiation thing. It's so important, and it's something that's a constant battle that we go through. Being able to say to my daughter, I'll be with you soon. I just have to deal with this. Are you okay to wait for this long? And let her negotiate it. I'll say 20 minutes, knowing I need 10. Because then I've got that wheel room of 10 minutes in the negotiation process that's going to follow. Now, a casual observer might think that that's a really unfair way to go about things, and that it's, your child should just be able to accept that you can't be with them 24/7 and do. For a neurotypical child, that's probably true. When you're dealing with PDA, when you're dealing with neurodivergence, you have to take on different parenting roles. You have to relearn parenting from the ground up, and that's what this is all about. I'd like to hear your thoughts and examples. If you can just hit the comments, let me know times that you felt this, examples in your own life, maybe something you see in your kids. And certainly I'd love to hear from you on anything that you are doing which helps to bring that equilibrium, keep those scales balanced. Put it in the comments. It's something I'd love to be able to share at a later date. I'll see you again on the next episode. In the meantime, please do stay safe.